the moment they wear a red t-shirt and campaign on our behalf, they must comply with the philosophy of this party, which is one of inclusion and bringing people together, one of development and progress. So we say to them, don't spend all of your time criticizing the past government. We can do so once in a while, or the council. Focus on what we can do in these communities should we succeed. Because that is one thing they cannot do, particularly in places like the Georgetown, Linden, and New Amsterdam. So because they've been there all their lives, practically throughout the existence of these bodies, and they have failed miserably at what they have been doing, what are they going to really promise people? More of the same? So they have to resort to ad hominem attacks, like attacking people, and a whole range of extraneous things which most voters don't want to hear about, because they just want to hear as to what will be done to improve their communities and their lives in those communities. So we make sure that we talk to people. You would have seen me going to Mabaruma and Port Kaituma. We didn't do major public meetings as yet. That will come in a later phase. But just speaking to the people who are actually going out to do the work, so they're equipped with the information. And when they are asked questions, because they are asked many questions, they would confront issues like they may go to a community that might have been hostile to us in the past, and somebody would say, oh, you're a racist party. How you address that issue? Because as I said before, we show through our policies. We've equipped people with that information. They will hear all of the rumors that APNU continue to spread. Like in the city, APNU told the people in the front row in East and West Ruimveldt that should the PPP win Georgetown, we remove all those squatters there on the front row, exciting fear among the people. But this is typical of APNU. Of course, it's not true, because those people have lived there for a very long time. And if you know anything about the PPP, we have not done the heavy-handed sort of removal of people from where they are living and even squatting. We've regularized, since we've been in office, in our tenure, over 150 squatting areas and converted them into today what you see as major housing communities. We've assisted people even on the Mucker stretch to make sure that they have an alternate arrangement or they get compensated. That's our approach. So it hasn't, first of all, there's been no talk about removing anyone, squatters, but that's what they're saying to people because they have nothing else to say. And this is what APNU has been doing. They've done that with the vendors. And we had to address that issue also with the vendors. So it's a lot of fear-mongering among people. They're told people in Old Boys Town will send in policemen every day to harass them in their communities. That's the word. They can't campaign on anything positive. So you've seen this, and you've heard us in the last couple of days laying out to people what we're campaigning on. As I said before, we'll go to every home and bring the campaign there. Now, I've seen it continues to bother APNU that people are coming to the People's Progressive Party, and many of those people are of Afro-Guyanese descent. So they have to find an excuse for it. An excuse to almost, it's like self-comforting for themselves because they live in a bubble. and also to explain this away to other people because they're worried about an exodus. And it's going to happen because the moment people start working with this party, they will see that we stand for progress. And so they're fearful of that, so they have to find, Norton keeps peddling the nonsense, oh, in Linden we pay people to come to listen to us. If you look at the crowd throughout the speech and you listen to the rapt attention to all the speakers, you can't pay people for that. What you should see, when we took some red t-shirts up, and there was a mad scramble, the guy said to me, we don't have enough for it. We don't have to pay people to wear this. Contrast this with Norton going to Paradise, and he has someone walking around with him in a loud hailer saying, come out and meet the leader of the opposition. We're here with the leader of the opposition. This is a stronghold, Paradise. And nobody, even the dogs, are turning away and moving off. Nobody is coming out of their yards, walking down a street looking pathetic. You know, it's a sad thing. It's a sad, I'm even embarrassed for him. And he is my political opponent, and I'm embarrassed to him. And it's not that, nobody even wants to listen to him. So this is what's happening, that's in the campaign as we move forward. Now, as I said before, when I come here, I will spend a short while on some of the press, their press conference, and then I move off into other things. So they had their press conference, the large group of people that they carry to these press conferences. And again, they engage in a lot of sophistry and misinformation, almost shamelessly ignoring the sordid, dirty history that they just recently emerged from, as though this country would have collective amnesia. We have such short memories. We will always remember what the atrocities that they wreaked upon this country just a short while ago. So Mahi Paul said, the PPP focus on control of communities so that they can control the waterfront properties and to give them away to friends, families, and favorites. So we want to control Linden and Georgetown and New Amsterdam to give away waterfront properties to our friends and family. Now clearly, he must remember, last week I mentioned they have one person who was on the campaign launch who's been busy doing that, hunting out every little alleyway that they have. In fact, the mud flats, trying to, even where the cokers go out into the Demerara River, trying to sell that off from the city council or lease it out. And I called a name last week. One of the councillors who was on the campaign. They're doing that at city council. Even the little alleyways going out on the Demerara River, that's what they're doing. And we had to put a stop to it. The city would have no drainage if that were to happen. But let's talk a bit about land. So we saw recently a case with Minister Jordan, but I'll come back to that case substantively. But we all witnessed not just one case, but several cases involving hundreds of acres of land being sold to people and not a cent collected, but they got the transport passed, which is an illegal act. The state did not collect payment, but gave them title to the land at Ogle, a large number. We had to withdraw all of those. We could have charged them, and maybe Jordan would still face charges for those because he did something that was totally illegal, vested the property in people's names, and they didn't pay a cent for it. And those are hundreds of acres. The Lands and Survey sold a property to a miner, collected over $100 million from him for 100 acres at the Ogle area, but never issued a lease, but never defined the boundaries. So when we got into office, he said, "Are you taking back the land?" And we said, "There's no land to take back because in your lease, there are no boundaries for the 100 acres. We don't know where you paid the money. You paid $100 million for a property that you lease from Lands and Survey, and there are no coordinates saying where the land is, but it's at Ogle. So what is it we're going to take back?" We can give you details about this. If you want details, I can supply the details a little bit later, because we need to go back, since Mahipal raised it about land, and PPP want to give friends and families. We recall another set, hundreds of acres on the East Bank now, leased directly by NISIL, but done in a manner where they remove some important clauses from the lease so that the land could be reassigned easily or flipped. And those lands were flipped, and the people who flipped the land earn hundreds of millions of dollars too. They just got it from NISIL because there was no restrictive clause in it that was removed, and they reassigned it and collected large sums of money from people, hundreds of acres of land. We can give details about that too. We saw people at the office of the president. I mentioned in Linden, they were at Dallawalla Creek. Mr. Bristol from office of the president got 12.6 acres of land. This is in Linden. I don't know if he has any connection with Linden. That land was safeguarded since I was president for potential industrial estate for Linden. He got it. The same person got a large tract of land, I think over 100 acres, in the Palmyra area by the seaside. I can't remember the exact location, but it's where potentially a deep water harbor will go. Got land at Moko. Lowenfield got 216 acres in Linden. These are the people who got their land. Now, Jordan on March 23rd, 2020, after the elections, this was signed, the order came out in the Gazette, signed by Jordan, published in the Gazette, vesting land to over 100 and something persons in Linden. So this is after they lost the elections. Now, in the same Linden area, at another time, since Mahipal talks a lot about giving away to waterfront properties to friends and family, obviously he would know that Amanza Walton this year got a 0.781 acre of land on the right bank of the Demerara River. Owen Walton, another Walton, got a 0.277 acres of land. And Malaysia Walton got a 0.277 acres of land. And so we see Walton got land, current member of parliament. Valerie Adam Yearwood got two pieces of land, it seems, here, over 1 acre of land. Valerie Adams Yearwood, who was another minister of the government. There are several others who got land. Now there is a person here who got 2 plots of land, but their address was 92 Sugarcane Street, South Rumfeld. I think this was Mr. Jordan, lives at either 91 or 93 Sugarcane Avenue. But this person got 2 acres of land, 2 plots of land in Linden. These are right bank of the Demerara River. If we talk about waterfront property, who were given waterfront property. So obviously Jordan's neighbor got land. I can go down a long list, you know, a long list. And this guy shamelessly says, we want to control the city and New Amsterdam because we want to give out lands to friends and family. It is a sickening thing. And the issue with the court matter that will be appealed, that where it says Jordan was cleared, the charges were dismissed against him. Let us understand one thing clearly, that the Chief Justice ruled on this identical matter. When Minister Ashney Singh was charged by APNU for the land at Movie Town, where 10 acres were sold at about $20 million an acre, it is higher than the highest bid we had, which was about 16 million when we went to public tender. There was a cabinet decision. He was acting pursuant to a decision of the privatization board and the cabinet. He acted pursuant to that. And they charged him for that, and also the Demerara Estates. That was through a public tender, the land was sold. And it was challenged. The defense was that he is not considered a public officer, therefore there's no malfeasance by a public officer. And the Chief Justice, I have the ruling here, the Chief Justice ruled on this matter. And she concluded that Ashney Singh would have to face the charges because according to the Constitution of Ghana, he is a public officer once he held the position of Minister of Finance. Now, identical matter, identical issue came up, the same issue came up, only this case is where former Minister Jordan was charged for selling a property worth 30 to 40 million US dollars for $100,000 US dollars. Not like the Ashney case, which was a public tender, and it was 10 acres of land sold at $20 million per acre, which was a high price at that time. It was a way back for Movie Town. And we have this ruling. So our understanding, that's why I support the Attorney General when he says that our understanding and his understanding of the law is that the lower courts have to abide by precedents set by higher courts. And so it seems as, I don't want to say anything that may seem disparaging of any person in the judiciary, but it seems as though there are two sets of criteria on which you judge people, and that shouldn't be. I'm not going to explore that further, but I'll come back to this issue about judiciary. So clearly, Mahipal should not, or Norton shouldn't even mention anything about land policies. In the several years they've been there, find out how many people got access to housing. before the no confidence motion was passed, they had not developed a single new house lot in the country before the no confidence. All they were doing were reallocating, taking back from people who had plots of land and reallocating them in the period from 2015 to 2018. Then, after the no confidence motion, they were hurriedly spending money, spent a whole deal of money, went back for supplementary. They had no money in the budget to address housing. You recall they convened parliament illegally and got a supplementary budget to do housing. This is after the no confidence motion, and then put in some basic infrastructure on a few plots of land, but called in people and gave them lots of pieces of paper. You know, say you have a plot of land now, because they knew they were going to face the elections again. And then now we are stuck with having to fulfill those promises. So they did nothing really for land. And so Norton is taking umbrage that I said Amelia's ward, that I walked there when it was bauxite land and stuff. I remember going there. Dark bauxite land, worn out. And that scheme took when I was president. Today, look what it is. And Block 22 started when we were in government. Both schemes are what they are today because of PPP Civic, not Upton. They did nothing for housing practically in London, except to give the people there. And the people of Linden should see that whole list. I think we should publish it so they would see who really got the land in that period. So, two different policies. I'm not even going to talk about the other people who got large tracts of land. I dealt with that in opposition. There are lots of land given out. The Wales, all the lands at Wales were given out, just like that. They sold out the properties, the buildings at the sugar estates, leased them out at peppercorn rent from both at Wales and at Enmore. But it was a mass transfer of resources in that period to friends and families and the politically connected. So they should never ever mention land issues and allocation of land again because of the record they have. But because they're so shameless, people like Mahipal and the others, they will continue to do it. They will continue to do it. But it's up to us to ensure that the people of this country find out precisely what happened in that period. The other issue that was mentioned at the press conference is the chicken shortage in the country. They mentioned chicken shortage. Now, this is Norton. The ban on imported chicken is another manifestation of action in the absence of a comprehensive approach, trying to sound profound. Now, the fact is that we have a glut of chicken at this point in time. The prices have come down. The farmers keep harassing us all the time. What are you going to do to help us? You have a lot of imported chicken coming into the country. And they basically, it's driving down the prices. So my suspicion is, and from what I've been hearing, I'm doing some investigation into this because he just said it at a press conference, but before I came here, I made a couple of calls. So a big importer is giving them some money, Norton, and that's why this came up. But Norton doesn't understand the details of the sector. So let me tell you a bit. When the PP got into office, I used to be at finance at that time. We were importing more neck and back at that time, containers upon containers, than probably what the whole world consumed. And why was that so? Because neck and back was zero consumption tax. There was a 30% consumption tax at that time on other parts, like the leg and the breast. So everybody used to declare whatever they brought in as neck and back. So we had large quantities coming in. There was no local production. The entire market was supplied from foreign chicken. Today, we're producing about 140 million pounds of chicken per annum. This is our production now. About 140 million pounds of chicken. If you think about a 1 million population, say we're 1 million, it's a little less. We're consuming on an annual basis, each Guyanese, 140 pounds of chicken annually. That is one of the highest consumption rates in the world. We eat a lot of chicken in this country. So I was shocked when I saw that we're consuming nearly twice the US per capita consumption. And that's a man, woman, and children, right? That's it. So that's why it's good business. All these places are booming, the KFCs and everything else. So, but we're supplying, that's our production. We have about 18,000 people now who earn a livelihood in this industry. So Norton wants to take that away from them, to allow the imported chicken to come in again, or the chicken to be smuggled in, to kill the livelihood of all of these farmers and the people who are employed in the sector, kill local production because they're getting paid off to make a case. This is what is happening now. Under the PPP government, this didn't happen by chance, Mr. Norton. So we have a comprehensive policy. We've been encouraging this sector. Since we got back into office, this is just in this short period. Before that, we did a number of things that caused the sector to grow. But we've given access to land for 5 additional large poultry farms, about 10,000 birds per week. We're allowing hatcheries and everything to come in duty-free. We have zero-rated all of the poultry inputs and veterinary supplies for the industry. When we got back into office, we found that one of the biggest vulnerabilities to the local poultry industry was the variable price for their input into feed production, because we use a lot of corn and soya. And when the COVID period hit, because of supply constraints, it put a lot of pressure on local production, and therefore it will push up costs here. So we met with all the poultry farmers. The president convened a meeting. I was there with all of the large poultry farmers, and we said, we have to work together to produce the corn and soya here. They've started that project. It's growing now, and within 3 years, we'd be self-sufficient with corn and soya. So it is a comprehensive approach to the industry to generate a local industry. We are trying to break down the phytosanitary barriers across the Caribbean so we can now have our poultry products go into those markets that are highly regulated. And also we can open up export markets for industry. So Norton wants, So his economist, who is not an economist, said, we import about 3 million of chicken and chicken products. We have not addressed low-cost production to encourage competition locally. Nonsense. I don't understand what he says sometimes. This is it. So, Norton, you can take the donation from the people who are importing the chicken, but don't try to destroy the local industry. And he just said that he wants us to basically allow free rein on imports. Norton said Jagdeo is mentally ill. Thank you for that compliment, Mr. Norton. He's a madman, right? So obviously, my display of madness was what I said in Linden, because obviously he can't go to Linden and get a crowd like what we did. He has to go with his loud hail and say, come out and meet the leader of the opposition. So that's bothering him a lot. But he would never dispute the facts of what I said to the people of Linden. That they had in the 5 years, in the period when we got into office in 1992, the bauxite industry was dead. Desmond Hoyt had hired a firm called Minproc, an Australian firm, through a World Bank loan to either restructure or divest, close the industry. Their conclusion was that the industry is not viable, they have to close it. And we fought, not just in Linden, but in the entire region. I don't want to repeat the history of how we had to go in the Berbice River with our Rhyme and all of the others, because a long history, and it is intertwined and with a lot of intrigues on their part, and Lincoln Lewis was at the center of all of this, basically misleading people. But to cut this short, we had to get a new investor and save whatever jobs we could. And until today, we've subsidized the sector. We kept it going until we got an investor. We ran the industry ourselves for a while, and then we managed to get an investor, and you still have maybe 600 jobs today because of that. We invested in power facility. The old power plant was falling apart. Now we have power. We maintain the subsidy to the people of the community throughout our tenure. The new rumor there is the Patterson-like guy, what's his name, the regional chairman. He's telling people if the PPP wins there, they're going to take away your free electricity and subsidized water in Linden. Of course, we've been in government. That's a central government policy. That is not a town council policy. But he's saying if we win the town council, we'll take it away, because he has nothing else to say to people. But Norton can't dispute that history. Can't dispute that the PPP has done more for housing in the entire period. He can't dispute the new schools and the water treatment plant and the new hospital and all the roads being built, including the road to his pig farm. I didn't even know he had a pig farm there. And I saw Edge Hill walking on a new, spanking new paved asphaltic road leading right up to his pig farm in Linden. He must be grateful. Norton should be really grateful to us now for this. I didn't even know, but that's it. He can't say anything about the LEAP program, the Linden Economic Advancement Program, because when I was Minister of Finance and then President, we put that program in place. That at that time, that was when things were really, really bad in the country. It's a $12 million US program, building roads into what West Watuka to open up the agricultural lands there, or the incubator for small business, or the LEN program, the Linden Enterprise Network Small Business Program, that they subsequently, Valerie Patterson was running the program, and there were a lot of funds were used not for the intended purpose and not the intended sectors. So until now, we have issues with that. So he can't say anything about that. So I'm mentally ill, I'm a madman. That's what he has to say about my trip to Linden. That's what he's saying to the people in Linden. Not anything on what they will do. What the town council has been busy diverting funds and the region into the pockets of some of the same people they're going after. And I said it clearly. Solomon Sharma and Vanessa Kisoon can't help themselves. They were sidelined by the last government. Granger just popped in occasionally into the community and then would hustle out of the Linden. They only went down there to convert West Watuka House. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on that. Chandeliers brought in for the West Watuka guest house for the ministers and the others to go and hang out there. That is their record in Linden. So, Mr. Norton, these are some of the things. Then he says something that's very dangerous. Now, I met with the ERC earlier this week, and they're trying to meet all the political parties. It's a new ERC, and we talked a lot about their mandate. And I said to them they would have the full support of the People's Progressive Party in all of these, in the discharge of their mandate. I urge them to be firm on anyone who tries to divide our people. I reminded them of the enormous powers that they have, and that they must not be timid in exercising those powers, both investigatory powers and powers of sanction. And we had an extensive discussion, and then I brought to them some very troubling issues that are concerned with the country. The rhetoric on dividing our people, etc. I told them also about APNU's proclivity to going abroad. So they don't, because they do this for propaganda reasons, they know they can't push the discrimination line in Guyana much, because people see them for what they are, and it's not getting the traction or the race line here. So they go abroad to the UN agencies, and you see occasionally Nigel Hughes will be presenting at some report somewhere, or somebody will be presenting some report, or they would write Kamala Harris about it. You remember the letter they wrote Vice President Harris. But they will never go to the ERC, the constitutional body. They would love to bypass the constitutional body and go abroad. Although this is a bipartisan constitutional body that was designed in that manner to investigate acts of discrimination. But they know if the investigation were to take place, their allegations would be disproved. And therefore, they'd have no ground on which to make these allegations internationally. So that's why they go abroad. They excite attention there by passing this body. And I told the ERC they must zealously guard this. And I hope that the UN also and the UN agencies do not help to undermine the authority of this constitutional body, because it's vested with enormous powers. So Norton, just at this press conference, has said the government seems to be pushing for physical confrontation, and let them know we are not short of people for a physical confrontation. Now, Norton is a petty bully. He wants to talk tough, but I shouldn't get excited about it, But really, these guys are cowards. They have another one, I forgot his name, from Georgetown. Dexter something. He's a city councilor. Harding or someone from in South Georgetown. When the women are campaigning, you know, the activists and stuff, he harasses them all the time. He wouldn't go to harass any of the male campaigners because he's a coward. He's a coward, but he's doing that all the time. But this is what they do all the time. Annette Ferguson, with her lunacy all around the place, walks around harassing she leaves where she is to go to harass her activists who are campaigning. Have you ever seen any PPP person harassing them or saying you can't go campaign? Norton can walk around with his bullhorn as much as he wishes to call people out to meet him. So this should be, the ERC should pay particular attention to this, because we know this guy is a petty bully, but he is prone, when he sees he's getting more and more desperate, and his desperation could cause him to go down this route because he doesn't have anything to say. So he wants to sound profound or somebody with gravitas, and therefore he makes these threats. Now for me personally, I will ignore his threat because Norton can scare anybody, but it's bad when the leader of the opposition threatens the country. And therefore the ERC must look at this and these petty bullies. And people must now, since the body is fully constituted, they should write the ERC on these matters. Then these should be fully investigated. So Norton, again, on the oil and gas, I don't know what his positions are again, because I got some things here from my staff. They listen to this, but I'm very confused because they don't seem to have a clear position on any issue, except to parrot what other people have been saying. But when cornered, don't have any original thought or a clear position on any matter. So we have clarity on these issues. I spoke about it last time. For example, I don't know whether he wants to renegotiate the Stabroek block or not. You know our position on that. We're not clear about that. We don't know about whether they would still submit any comments on the PSA, because he has had a long time to do that. We're still unclear whether they have any comments to submit, because for them, they only criticize. So what in the draft PSA he doesn't like, I said the last time, we're finalizing it, but we will, if they submit any comment now and it has any merit and it will improve the final PSA, we'll take it into account. So this is something. He defines their position by what is in the media. He either supports something but then withdraws, or what we say. Can't be clear about where they stand on this matter, on any matter for that matter. So this is a very important issue for us, because you see, they have no policy-making capacity, absolutely none. And so the press conference, as far as I'm concerned, was more of the same. So on the same sector, I see that another court case has been filed, this time by Elizabeth Dean Hughes. In fact, two issues have been in the news, trying to get the court to say that the permit for the NGL plant and the pipeline shouldn't have been issued by the EPA because of land, that the land issue had not been settled. I'm paraphrasing, basically. That's what, that the land issue should have been sorted out before this permission was issued. And then the same Elizabeth Dean Hughes, she wrote the Exim Bank saying that the loan should not be made available to Guyana. Kaieteur News, in reporting that, reported it accurately, but in the last sentence said that the Brassington said that the government of Guyana will be repaying $50 billion US over 20 years for the pipeline. So that is totally inaccurate. It could be an honest mistake, but knowing Kaieteur News, that was stuck in there to excite people again. $50 billion US over 20 years. You can check that yourselves. It's wrong. There's no $50 billion US over 20 years. In fact, if the pipeline, how would you pay back $50 billion if the pipeline is going to cost just over $1 billion or $1 billion over 20 years? So it's wrong. But clearly, Elizabeth Dean Hughes is one of the people who are from the so-called environmental lobby, who is very concerned about the government of Guyana polluting the world and the production of oil and gas, and we're not following the rules and stuff like that. I believe that there is a bigger agenda here, and that many people don't want this project to move forward because this project will mean transformation in Guyana, lower electricity costs, lower cost of cooking gas, more new industries, massive new industries with the additional gas coming through the pipeline. It could be transformative. And they're worried that this will have a political impact. People will say, oh, the PPP has delivered this. So that will continue, and people are politically aligned. But is this all altruistic or out of good intention? And that's what I'm questioning here. Now, from what I gather, Elizabeth Dean Hughes is the sister of Nigel Hughes, of the infamous 34 is the majority of 65 court case. But what I found out also is that just in February of this year, the brother of Elizabeth Dean Hughes, Stuart Hughes, filed a court case against the government of Guyana because he has land on the pipeline route and he was not satisfied with the compensation or the acquisition. So one has to wonder that 2 months after the brother filed a case for additional resources for the land that they have on the pipeline route, that her sister now will come and try to block the project totally. The sister files a case now under the guise of concern for Guyana, tries to block the case totally. So I just wonder, and I'm not sure the country must wonder too. I'm not saying maybe it's just coincidence, but in life, I know there are very few coincidences. So I believe that these do-gooders must also declare interest, conflict of interest. I believe so. Now, clearly, if you look, the environmental permit was issued on the 25th of November 2022. But clearly the purpose of the land was known since, or the acquisition order, the intent to acquire, and that this will be a public project, and that we are acquiring land for a project that is deemed public works and of a national importance. That was known since the 7th of August 2021. So the EPA knew that the government of Guyana was acquiring the land to build the pipeline. So this is the order signed by One Edge Hill, and it says, the Acquisition of Lands for Public Purposes Act. In exercise of the powers conferred upon me by sections 3 and 4 of the Acquisition of Lands for Public Purposes Act, I make the following order. This order may be cited as the Acquisition of Lands for Public Purposes, Gas Pipeline Route Order 2021. This was done in August 7 of 2021. A year and 3 months before the permit was granted. So clearly the EPA knew that the land issue would have been settled, and that the government of Guyana had taken over responsibility for acquiring these lands for a project that is of national significance and of public purpose. This has to be known. But again, this matter, again, will be dealt with in the court. There are a few things I saw in the media that I want to address, because they may not have a direct bearing on this issue, but they're very important. So Stabroek News had this editorial about the PPC and the Integrity Commission. And I think the Public Procurement Commission, they're very capable of defending themselves, the constitutional body. So I'm not going to say much about this, only to say that the last person who should have complained about this is Patterson, knowing his track record on public procurement matters and the court cases that are now filed there, including one where they paid large sums of money to a company owned by someone who was providing consultancy services for them, political consultancy services for the supply of scales that never came to the country. So, and large sum of money. And I hope that people remember that. Please Google it. If you want more information, I can give you, because sometimes we forget these things. And this is outside of the one where he took an unsolicited bid, contrary to the procurement laws in the country, directly to the cabinet, bypassing the procurement authorities, and got a cabinet approval. That's illegal too. And he's facing the court. And he complains about the PPC, but I'm not going to say much about that. They're very capable of defending themselves, and this is a bipartisan body. It's made up with people that submitted names from APNU, as well as the APNU AFC and the PPP. Let them defend themselves. The Integrity Commission part is, I want to repeat that the Integrity Commission, they said in 2022, the largest number of people didn't submit their statements to the Integrity Commission. So there are lots of public officials, etc. But that can't be accurate. It has to be the 3 years on the APNU when nobody submitted. Then that had to be the largest. The 3 years on the APNU, no one was required to submit any their declarations to the Integrity Commission. 3 years of the 5 years done. Not a single one was required to submit, because they made that clarification, they said that. So that's the first clarification. But they said that they urge greater transparency. And I will support the newspaper's view that the Integrity Commission should publish all the names of the offender. I support that wholeheartedly as a party. We're not here to defend any public officer who does not submit his or her returns to the Integrity Commission. That's a law of our country, and we support fully the publication of all of the names of the people who are in default. I call Gail Teixeira because we've made it clear in the editorial said 17 members of parliament had not submitted, that for last year. I asked Gail Teixeira, she said to me that all of the PPP members of parliament had submitted. So if the editorial said 17 had not submitted, then the 17 must be from the other side. The 17 persons, members of parliament, must be from the other side, because she said to me, all of our MPs had submitted. So it would be interesting to ask Mr. Norton about that too. This is some question, and whether he supports the publication of their names, and whether he himself has submitted. So these would be important issues, but I would like to support that. On the vending, there is another editorial, and whilst I agree with the tone of the editorial again in this issue, I need to point out that there are a couple of things. So it says one thing, though, that was not accurate, that Sherrod Duncan and the mayor were charged under the Racial Hostility Act and the Cybercrime Act because they were trying to prevent the removal of the vendors from Newmarket Street. That's not what they were charged for, obstruction. They were charged for what they said. Now, clearly someone can come there and express their view, but it is what they said. The mayor started religious slurs, and Sherrod Duncan and others continued with that, something that is prohibited by law in the country. They were not charged because under these two acts because they tried to prevent that. And in fact, we believe that a lot of the city councillors were collecting money from the people in front of the hospital, because we talked to people. We said the ambulances have to come through here. People have to drop off their patients here. You cannot vend here and block the entrance to an important institution that is the primary institution to accord healthcare services to our people. Just imagine you person having a heart attack or need emergency attention, and the ambulance can't get through, and it's your family. So we say, that's not structured vending for us. That's not structured. That you have to vend so you don't prevent public purpose. You can't go and vend on a busy, like say a highway now, where the cars have to stop on the highway to buy stuff for you and expect that is so. Because if they stop on a highway, then that's a different matter. But clearly in the city, we have to ensure that, and the editorial is right, a lot of people are single parents and women, and they have to earn a living. So we have to find a way. We tried. When I was president, we acquired a piece of land, and again, land policy. So this is not of recent vintage, the APNU's approach to giving away land. Their Water Street part there was Tulsi Prasad was part of the CREEP in the early 90s, the Committee for the Re-election of President Hoyt. As a result, he got some land there sold for less than $4 million. I think it was about 2-point-something million. A prime piece of land on Water Street by the bank there. So we said we will acquire the land when I was president for public purpose and hand it over to the city council to put vendors there so that we can have more place for vendors. They don't have to vend on the street. We ended up in court. They challenged that thing, and the land, we ended up, the state having to pay over $300 million in compensation for the land when it was sold just a few years prior to that by the government of Guyana to Tulsi Prasad for less than, I can't remember now, it couldn't be more than $4 million Guyana dollars. We spent over $300 million acquiring back the land. Gave it over to the city council. What happened? They didn't do it. They started going in there, favoritism, carving up the place. Before you know it, a lot of people who were politically connected got that. So we tried to help. That is why you can't give any money at scale to the city council. You pay the taxes, the government pays its taxes and stuff, but they're totally unaccountable. And we're saying in our new era, we want a live stream. If we control any place, City Hall or anywhere, we'd live stream every council meeting so you can see what's happening. This and that. We don't want people to go into City Hall to pay the rates and taxes. Must be paid online. People must search online, get their property taxes, the assessment, everything done online. So you don't minimize all of the room for corruption. So the vending issue is an important one. On the roadsides and the highways and stuff, we have to work with people, but it's a different matter. You can't have vehicles just stopping on the road, highways. So it is a policy where we will continue working, and we're doing a lot. It says that we should study the problem, the editorial, and I agree with that, but we are already doing that. We are inventorizing the vendors. We are finding out what's happening. They're getting small business grants. We're trying to move people up. A lot of the single parents are getting help now. So we do have knowledge of a lot of those who are vending for a living and trying to help them already, because we have done studies in the past. So it is something that I thought I should have cleared up there. I see in New Amsterdam they have another councillor, Kirk Fraser. He wrote a letter about New Amsterdam and how we neglect. Of course, it's similar. He has nothing to say, it's just like Linden. So the PPP is being blamed, and then his biggest thing about APNU they put lights on a couple of grounds and built 2 roads. And that is what he says, look what APNU has done. He forgets that they're in charge of the council in New Amsterdam all the time. So he then goes back and repeats the whole thing about, oh, we put the bridge to bypass New Amsterdam and it was political. I will send you a document with over 3,500 pages of study done by a consultant called Louis Berger. Before we decided on where the crossing should be, they identified 5 sites, did the full feasibility study. Look, the ideal location we thought was past Everton, but when they look at the additional traffic time, the wear and tear on vehicle, and they look at the stream of benefits and the stream of costs, they came up with, they did a feasibility study for every area, the numbers worked in favor of that location. We didn't do it by chance, and you couldn't take this in. But that's how APNU is. It's wild accusations. We can show you the studies, we can put them online, and you will conclude that this was done in a studied way. Like how there is everything that we do, there is a pattern to it. We think it through on the economic front. Not like APNU haphazard. And how they're building, suddenly they want to build a stadium in Durban Park. They came into office, we're building a stadium there. And 600 million is still missing the Auditor General report. We don't know where it went. My Paul didn't say anything about that, 600 million. So that's how they go. Granger, you recall Granger, he wanted the people in Linden to do breadfruit chips in Linden and plantain chips. That's what his economic plan was. People don't remember this, but that was their economic plan. Oh, let's do some breadfruit chips here and pepper sauce. You remember the interview that he did. So we're not like that. And I want this Kirk phrase, maybe it's just out of ignorance, because he's a counselor in New Amsterdam. So they're, again, in New Amsterdam, they're very concerned that people are not paying enough attention. And then I come to our dear friend, the criminal Rickford Burke. Now, I see a long 3 hours rant on the thing, because apparently he went to Uganda and they pulled him in and said, you're a wanted criminal in Uganda. But this guy is a con man, again, a con man who operates, he's running short of funds, he operates from his basement, and he is a criminal, pure criminal. And he takes offense with us calling him a criminal, but he's a criminal, an extortionist. And if he had all this courage, come and face the charges here. Prove yourself innocent. Come before the courts here. And come back and fight the extortion charge, because he's charged for extortion now, but he's hiding from facing the courts here in the country. So if you are so convinced that you can prove your case, just come and make the case in court. But he will never do that because he can snipe from abroad. There are a few other things, but maybe I'd leave those to the question and answer period. Yes, let me end there. Thank you. Yes, sure. Local content, right? Okay. Sure. Yeah, no, go on. Okay, so to do audit. So let's start at the local content. We said that there would be a review of the legislation only after we have studied the practice. We have had 1 year of implementation of the local content legislation. We have learned a lot during the year in terms of where we have capacity, where we don't have capacity, the loopholes that some foreign individuals and companies are trying to exploit to or creative mechanism that they are using to access what is designed and the benefits designed for our people exclusively. So all of this is being assessed. We have had from the sectors new requests for increasing the thresholds for local content in some entirely new areas, and to increase those in some areas, like the 40 areas that we had carved out, to increase those thresholds from the 42. So there's a lot of that going on now. Only after we have honed all of this together, studied it carefully, are we going to go with legislative changes. So we're not rushing to change the law. We're doing all of this because I think we have made a lot of progress for a country that had just put in place a legislation. We've had great amount of compliance by the oil and gas companies, but we still have issues with some areas. And even in the past, where some of our people represented that they had the capacity, and we put in hefty allowances for locals, we're finding that sometimes there is not the extent of the capacity in those areas that we had assumed when we passed the legislation. So that's why it's careful, and it requires careful calibration, but we must not, as a country, downplay what we have achieved together. We have passed, some countries have not had local content legislation for 30, 40, 50 years, even after they started producing. We managed to do this almost immediately. And this was a commitment we made as a party. As a result of that, if you talk to the business community, you would find that a lot of business now, their companies are forced to come to locals for things that they have been doing abroad. But it's not perfect as yet. So as we go along, we're going to improve on it. That's how we see it. It's an iterative process. It's back and forth, but we're working towards improving it and bringing greater benefits to our people. So that is ongoing. We're listening to people too. We're doing our own assessments. And Qatar has been doing quite a bit, a lot on the gas side. So we're looking as we come up with a national gas strategy, because we said once we get past the PSA, the new Petroleum Act, and complete the bid round, we turn all of our attention to a national gas strategy. And by that time, Exxon would have had to complete some of the studies they're doing about the utilization of the gas. They've done some preliminary work. Qatar, given its massive investments in that sector, LNG, has enormous capabilities that we will capitalize on. And we're hoping that maybe their direct entrance into the sector here, either through the bidding round, or through a bilateral arrangement, that would give diversity to the number of companies that we have here with different experiences, because most of them are not state-owned companies. Qatar is a state-owned company that will come here, so it would lend diversity. So we are looking forward to learn, just like how we learned a lot from Ghana in the local content law. We are looking to capitalize on their experience. ADNOC recently sent a team here. They're very interested in our oil, but they're also, when I was in Qatar, in UAE, we talked about training our people on marketing. They're going to do some training on marketing, etc. So we are looking at exploring that too from the UAE. So overall, to build capacity. And that's why I find the APNU's statement very puzzling, that we're not trying to do enough to build capacity for audits. Mr. Stacia has full authority to establish a unit in the GRA. We said to him, go ahead and establish the authority to do audits from the GRA perspective, build a unit. I know they're building the unit. They've been doing a lot of training of staff and all of that. So that is a capability within the GRA. Then within the country itself, we did a hybrid arrangement. We could have gone to do like what was done at the beginning, where APNU did, hired IHS Markit to do the first audit. It was a foreign company. We could have gone up that route and done the audit from 2017 to 2020 using only a foreign company. We said, no, no, no. We work at trying to pull together a consortium of local companies, Guyanese who live abroad and others. And then we said, you have to come in partnership with a foreign company with capability. As a result of this, because of our specific dedicated effort to involve Guyanese, we've had these audits, the last audit completed with heavy Guyanese involvement, and therefore starting to build a national capability. So I don't know what he's talking, I don't know who said that, but maybe this Low guy or the Soku man or Norton, but I don't know if he doesn't know about these things. So on the issue of the audit and the new PSA, the audit and the cost overrun. So clearly this is a very important issue about how we manage, whilst we can't manage costs in real time. Remember the debate we had with Kaichor. We can't do it in real time, but there's a requirement, since costs are an important factor in determining profit oil, because if the cost bank increases, it's less to the profit oil. Then we have to strengthen our capability to have more detailed information about projects and their costs, and then have any deviation from that only done with the explicit approval of the government of Guyana. So clearly that was a deficiency, and that is why the new PSA fixes that, the one that we're passing soon, because we recognize that. So clearly that is a very, very important issue in the future, and it's all towards getting better control of costs, having a bigger say in the control of costs without the day-to-day management, because we're not operators. And then also increasing the share of our take by the royalty, increased royalty, and the taxation of 10% from zero, and also the reduction in the amount that could go towards cost recovery. So that's an important issue. On the oil spill insurance and its repercussion globally, I notice a number of people, Ralph and the others, saying, oh, we shouldn't criticize the judiciary. Now, clearly, there are three branches in the government. And from all I've read, I've looked at every president, I've had people, lawyers, everybody send me a long list of things about what has been said by the Privy Council, by judges, etc., about fair comment. And in fact, some go beyond that to say that judges, that the judiciary, and these are by senior judges from developed jurisdictions, including in the UK, where we take a lot of our precedents from, saying that once you don't disparage the individual, which we are not doing, but we have a right to comment on a judgment. Where if citizens of a country, and more so those who are part of public policy, can't comment on a judgment that is made, then you're basically you're taking away some of the freedoms I have that are enshrined in the Constitution. My democratic right not to criticize the judge or who the judge is, or launch personal attacks on the judge, but to say we believe that this judgment is correct or we believe it's wrong for the following reasons. That's fair comment and should be available to every citizen of this country, particularly those in public policy and who would have to deal with the consequences of the judgment. So I've seen all sorts of people who want to ingratiate themselves maybe to judges, etc., and to the judiciary, come out and say, oh, the Attorney General shouldn't be criticizing the judiciary. I don't think he is criticizing any judge, nor the same thing here. I was expressing a view at the last press conference, which I will express again. But I saw Ralph Ramkaran, who came out of the woodwork. This is what Ralph Ramkaran said once in August, I think it was 2020. The timid, indecisive, and ineffectual decision-making of the CCJ has brought elections no closer, has left the Guyanese people defenseless in the face of an egregious assault on their constitutional rights, and has left open its decision to more than one interpretation. The Caribbean Court of Justice has failed Guyana. This is about a judgment they give. If I had said that this judge failed Guyana, you would have heard all sorts of things, because they would have said, I'm expecting a particular judgment from the judge, the named judge. I didn't say that. So this is what he said about the CCJ. I agreed, because I thought so too, that they should have had a date in the order for the elections to say you'd long, 15 months after the no confidence motion, that we had elections, when the constitutional provision says 3 months. But that is what he said. He said it's ineffectual, timid, the CCJ, and they've left Guyana defenseless, and all of that. So it's okay for him to say it, but not from one in public policy. Now, what I said is that we are playing on the global stage, and it was true. We are playing on the global stage, and I said it's not like the past. Every word uttered here, every decision made by our judiciary or the the EPA, they would have immediate resonance globally. And it happened. Immediate resonance globally. And that they can have a major impact on the investment climate in Guyana that we're trying, and therefore investments and jobs and well-being of this country. And that's why we have to ensure, that's why I supported the Attorney General in saying that the EPA should appeal the case, and the EPA in its own right felt that the judgment was not one that it could live with, and therefore which they have by law, they have a recourse to a higher court. They appeal the judgment. But it's not because we don't want Exxon to fulfill their obligations in Guyana. We want Exxon to ensure that any potential spill, and we've been working on that more than any government in the past APNU, to ensure that we're prepared for any eventuality. We want them to fully meet their obligations. And therefore, but we want to make sure that it doesn't have, that the quality of the decision and that the decisions made here, that they could be defended globally. And so, as we said, already I saw a report, and the report quoted, guess who they quoted? From the UK, they quoted Vincent Adams, who was the worst head of the EPA ever. He signed off a lot of these things. He signed the environmental permit. He didn't see this stuff necessary. He did that. And they quoted him, and then they quoted some Tom Salizer, who, I don't know where he come from, or this guy who had a degree in political science or something, but he was the one who said every Guyanese owe $9 million to ExxonMobil. And I said, he talking nonsense. I don't owe $9 million to Exxon. So I don't know if you owe any $9 million. These are the two people quoted. And then it starts getting resonance. Suddenly, the shareholders get a bit antsy. Now, if the shareholders say, don't invest anymore in Guyana until this issue is clarified, then the entire momentum here gets killed. But among the shareholders of Exxon, too, globally, because they are a publicly traded company, and here in Guyana, there's an environmental lobby that want to shut down the oil and gas industry, and it's playing out here and abroad too. And that will harm our country. We're not into this. Exxon has to meet all of its obligations, but we will not be a willing participant of a process that will destroy the investment climate in Guyana, and therefore affect our people and their ability to prosper. We will not do that. You've seen the report from the UK, The Guardian, already saying that others who were thinking about investing in Guyana are now, they have a more cautious approach. So this could affect the bid round. This could affect the bid round. And we have a duty. I saw the Attorney General make another post, and he questions. He has a right to question some of the things. Now he questioned, if Parliament vests the EPA, this is what the AG said, with the authority to issue, suspend, or revoke a license, could a court do that? Could a court do that? Because is this an overreach? And it's a legitimate question. Shouldn't we debate it? Or is it infallible? We dumb ourselves down because a judge makes a decision. we're not criticizing the judge, but we've seen cases where many people have criticized decisions made by our court. Which court in the world will determine that 34 is the majority of 65? Which court in the world? I don't. And so we should look at it. I will send you 50 authorities that talk about the citizen right, the ordinary man's right to be critical of the decisions. In the UK, in the US, people can go on television and do this openly. This sensitivity is convenient, but we will not tolerate the disparaging of any of the judges in a personal fashion. We will not tolerate that. But decisions, like when the executive makes a decision, or when the parliament makes a decision, it's up for public review. That's a right as citizens of this country, or else we give up on our rights. So the EPA will pursue its case. We don't want to deal too much with it, but we have to maintain an investment climate here that would allow investments to flow. When the investments flow here, our people, the hotels are built, they get more jobs. When they start fabricating things for Exxon, they get more jobs. The 500 drivers or so who are driving for the oil and gas companies, they have a job now too. They would maintain their job. Not some of the others who are politicians or have an agenda to shut down the industry. And that's what we see playing out here. We're not going to be part of that agenda.
Sir, just a follow-up from my
Yeah, sure.
understanding. I want to just go back to the issue of the cost overruns, where you said that the loophole has been fixed, a clause for the future.
Future. So when that comes to us formally, this now comes, they're in the process of securing response. This is for the new audit from Exxon. So first of all, the audit is submitted, then they write Exxon. You have to give them, I think it's 60 days by the PSA to respond. Once they respond, they have to now explain the cost overruns. They have to explain if they had expenditures. You know the three classifications. I'm not going to go through that back again that we spoke of the last time. They have to give explanations on all of those. Then it gets to a stage where our people, the GRA and the others, the ministry technical staff will say, we've heard the explanations. These are the explanations. Here, we believe this is a legitimate one, but these are not. And therefore, we now come to the government, we have to move forward. We'll write Exxon. That's when the policymakers would say, get involved. You're writing them. That's when, if we have disputes, the tribunal issue kicks in that we discussed some time ago. I don't want to repeat things that we discussed. Yes, please. Let me get this.
Several of the OECS countries have openly declared that doing business with them will see numerous benefits for the countries.
Yeah, what benefits?
Will see numerous benefits for their respective countries. OECS countries.
Who?
OECS countries, Organization for Peace and Crime.
Yeah, but who will? I didn't hear you from. Doing business with the OECS countries.
Doing business with Guyana will see benefits for their respective countries.
Okay.
And as such, we have seen that Grenadians and Vincent and Grenadines have already made official trips to Guyana where they've established business relationships. St. Kitts and Nevis has recently announced to their citizenship that they will be looking at establishing some relationships with Guyana in terms of businesses. What are your thoughts on the fact that several of the OECS countries are now looking at doing business with Guyana and have expressed that interest? And secondly, when the people took office in 2020, several pharmaceutical workers got lands at Wales, and also a number of lands were given for house lots. construction in Linden through NISIL. What is the status now of that situation here? I know they put a hold on some of these transactions. Like
Yeah.
this.
So there's a process of reacquiring the lands at Wales. And I don't know where the house lots at Linden, if it's the same thing that you're talking about, the vesting order, that I don't think we've taken any action against Jordan as yet for those that he did. But there are lots, if we had to charge Jordan for all of these, he probably have about maybe a couple hundred charges. 200-300 of them. So you have some movement at Wales on their land because those are needed, and we have a whole area. Remember, on the West Coast, we don't have much land for housing. And so when we did assess the demand for housing in Region 3, it was 14,000. This was about a year ago. I know they have issued some house lots already. So at that time, it was 14,000 persons had applied. When we look at the lands from iFlood going back, they mostly private lands. And then you have some land at iFlood, their sugar lands. We took a little bit for housing, but we didn't have much more public lands in Region 3. So that's why the Wales land were critical to do about 10,000 house lots. So you'd have a massive development at Wales, new industries and stuff. So if you should have the ministry or the CHPA. We had a team of technical people at the CHPA. We brought back some of them, old country planners and stuff, and they did a whole map of the area development, where we'd have an industrial area at Wales, we have a commercial zone, we have a green area, we have housing development into a massive community. So we need those lands to pursue that. For the housing drive, the 10,000 lots land, for the industrial development and commercial development. And a lot of the land has not been used, it's just people got them like that. So we're in the process of reacquiring those lands for the purpose of building out this massive new development that will see almost all the Guyanese who live in Region 3 get their plots of land there. And then it wouldn't be a very different, because the infrastructure going into Wales would be developed too. You know, the roads widen, 4-lane roads and stuff. And then with the bridge, it would be easy. So, because with the current harbor bridge, more people want to come across and live on this side of the river. But if you have a fixed bridge that they don't have to worry about day and night, they can go across, then it would be easy. We see more interest over there. So we're taking over those lands. The OECS countries, they're important partners in CARICOM, and they can serve as a good market for Guyanese product, but also they have a lot of to offer here. And we have a lot of investment opportunities to offer the business community there. So you're right, we have had missions, trade missions and investment missions from several groupings, but not just the OECS. We have had from Barbados and Jamaica and Trinidad, the larger jurisdictions of CARICOM, not just the OECS countries. Yes, please. Yeah.
Mr. Jagdeo, in addition to the audit concerns, there are also concerns that nothing is being done by government to boost monitoring of the oil industry. Can you, for the record, say what is being done by the government to improve Canada's monitoring capabilities and our oversight of the offshore operations as we move closer to the 1 million per day? I have two others. Do you want me to go straight into
Go through.
Okay. Exxon's shareholders have expressed reservations via a resolution that the financial implications of simultaneous oil spills or environmental mishaps for Guyana and the region. Is this a concern for government as well? And thirdly, sir, in regards to energy project, do you believe that the efforts being made to block the loan will be successful? Is government prepared to finance the project from oil revenue? And on the pending court matter, do you foresee this affecting the timeline for completion of the project?
Okay, so we believe we've had some really great engagements with the Exim Bank at the most senior level, the president of the bank, and the process is going forward smoothly. They know about the naysayers here. They've seen them, they've heard them many times before. In fact, they tell us a bit about the naysayers. They know the people who are serious and who are not. So I don't believe these fringe elements, and especially now that they may have other interests, like the one I just explained about the family interest here, they may even pay even scantier attention to it. So I don't think Exim Bank will be seduced by the Rick Fordbergs of the world. They're a serious institution. So the United States government is fully supportive of the project. U.S. company is implementing the project, and we believe that's moving smoothly. The project will be completed on the timeline. So far, the timeline remains constant in December 2024. That's the timeline, and there is no cause for shifting that timeline at this point in time. We're very pleased that the EAB recently ruled on the matter, and so as far as we're concerned, all the bits are in place. The only one now that we're working on is the bit about evacuating the power, building the substations, and we went out to tender. We had 3 bids for that. We hired Stantec, again, a Canadian company, to help us evaluate the bids because it's very complex, and we are now in the process that's soon to award that contract. So that will be the bit about evacuating the power from Wales, taking some of the power back into West Demerara, bringing the bulk of the power across the river to come into the other parts of the interconnected system. So a massive transmission system, so that will lend to stability in the grid, so you don't have tripping and all of that. So that bit is being worked on now, and the timeline is still, they have to get that bit in time for the completion of the power plant and the gas pipeline by end 2024. The shareholders, as I said, Exxon is a publicly traded company. So you have, I don't know, tens of thousands of shareholders in ExxonMobil. Any publicly traded company here any person can raise any issue. Like the banks, DAH may have 5,000, they can submit any resolution. But it is worrying from the perspective, I don't want to kite your news, but Jagdeo worried. I can see Glenn Lal telling you all to put that. Jagdeo worried, right? So let me rephrase that, because, as a policymakers, we have to take seriously any issue that could affect our country's standing in the world and our ability to attract investments and to keep the momentum that we have developed here in Guyana going to transform Guyana. So that is, from that perspective, we have to take seriously every issue raised, whether it's minor and it has a dim chance of succeeding, or it's a major concern. So that is the issue about that. And monitoring capability, I addressed this matter at one time. I said, we are trying to deal with the framework first, and that is why you've seen us focus on a lot of things we criticized when we're in opposition. The PSA, the new the Petroleum Act not being sufficient to manage a modern industry, not being adequate. We're fixing those two. We criticize the Natural Resources Fund Act. We fixed that. We're passed the new local content law. So these are things that we said we need to fix it. And auction and all of those. We need to go out for auction. I admitted at the last time that because our focus has been on the framework, the next wave of the attention of the ministry and the government will be on building greater monitoring capability. So once we strengthen the provisions, for example, on data that Exxon has to supply, then we have to verify that that is actually happening. So the PSA will fix a lot of things about the extent of the data and the frequency of the data that they have to submit, but we need to verify. And this is where building the monitoring capability. So they will have a fiber that they're building that will have an operating center that is remote in the headquarters. That is why when we spoke about the headquarters, it's not just a headquarters, they have an operating center there where they can remotely address any issue on the rigs, like shut off and things like that. So we hope either to have a feed there on the fiber or to independently have, either through VSAT or through the fiber, a monitoring capability that will verify that how much oil is flowing through the pipeline. We'll have real-time data. We're now waiting for the submission, but we'd have real-time data, building our own review capability. Now, when I was in Ghana, I visited a group that's doing this for the gas fields. There we had a Canadian company that came here, Guyanese owned, that is big into this. So they've been pressing us a lot to move on this issue. But you know, they made proposals. We said we want to go to tender. We will go to tender, but of course there'll be preferences if there's a Guyanese company, Guyanese owned company that can do this. And they have great international capability. They're doing this in Canada already, looking at offshore monitoring, etc. So clearly that is a bit deficient at this point in time, but this is the next wave of what we have to do. It's the progression. Yes. Sure. So there's one thing in the EPA Act that I think today was mentioned again by Anil Nandalal, but but the EPA issued a statement that they have to have a sum. The act says they have to have a sum. So where they have to put that sum as part of the permit, right? So there is a sum, a defined quantity. Unlimited is not a defined quantity. So clearly the act says that if you have to identify a sum, you have to do certain simulations. You have to study what the worst case scenario and therefore come up with a figure that can address worst case scenarios. But all of these are technical issues to be addressed by the EPA, by not politicians. And that is when the politicians address these matters, then it destroys your credibility internationally, because then they say that, the agency is not independent. So that is why we're very cautious about naming figures and saying this. We can support the EPA in its appeal and stuff like that, but they have to do all the simulations. So you're saying a scenario where you have like two oil spills. It's highly unlikely that they would happen simultaneously, but what happens if that's so? They have to simulate all of this. Now, the capping stock, which when they had difficulties in the Gulf because they couldn't get down to cap the rupture. And the oil continued to pump out. Now, one of those, under the last permit for Payara, they did not want to bring that into the country because it's expensive. And we said, you have to have one of those in the country so that you can deploy it swiftly in case you have, say, a well blowout. You can deploy that. And that would be a cap and stop in the country. And then a subscription with an agency that supplies these. So two things they have to do. That is in terms of plug-in and limiting the fallout, how many barrels would actually come out. So we have sought to do that, not just from the insurance side, but to address the issue of capping this stuff. But these questions about what happens if two wells come out, what happens if the oil drifts a bit further to another country, those are simulation models that the EPA has to do. And I know they've been working on these. I know they've been consulting heavily with the environmental protection bodies in many countries. So they're not acting capriciously. I know there are a slew of technical people there who are working. That's why I did not agree with the same way that the judiciary doesn't want people calling names, and we shouldn't do that. They shouldn't be disparaging the staff by some very nasty comments about the staff of the EPA. And so so these models, but you can come up with 100 different scenarios, 2 wells going at the same time, or 1 or 5, and what if there's an explosion on the FPSO? There are hundreds of different models, but globally, people have been producing oil in all the countries in the world. In Norway, in the North Sea, Norway has been producing oil all these years too. They didn't say, what if there was a spill here? Let's stop the production of production. Norway has the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world now because of oil production. But they didn't stop it because they say, what if the oil wells ruptured here? They didn't stop it. Yes. Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is that there have to be verification because these are run by the ministry. This is a real possibility. We've had a couple of cases where we've had to call in people. So there is that potential for abuse because, but if you collect money under false pretense, assuming we know you're not showing up to work, you've gone off elsewhere, and you collect 3 months' salary, we'll recover it. We'll recover it because you will be found out eventually if you don't show up because there's a register there. So it may happen. I can't put my neck on the block. There are lots of people there that it wouldn't happen, but we'll deal condignly with people who move on to another job but still did not resign from the part-time job, might be collecting it. If you know of any case like that though, send it to us. Send it to us. If you know any case, or write about it in your newspaper, call their names. Right? So write about it too, because that helps us. That helps us to do it. Yeah. Oh, yesterday. No, I didn't follow as yet. No, I don't. That was yesterday. No, that means you didn't listen to all that I said. For example, it was not Exxon that. Yeah, but we believe, but this is common sense. It's common sense. Sometimes you have to have common sense, and we believe in leading from the front. We're not the PNC. We don't hide behind a private sector or a subterfuge to make our positions known. So we want this country to know when they hear from us, it is what we feel and what we will do. We don't go in the shadow of the night and shout something and then get a third party. It is clear as day. It's clear as day that if you have, I could have predicted this because I've been around a long time. You have a ruling like this, you're going to have international consequences. The world sees it. You take every Reuters, Bloomberg, almost every single agency, that international agency, tracks Guyana on a daily basis in the oil and gas sector. In the past, you would have a major disaster here. We lost 55% of our gross domestic product in the 2005 flood. Nobody didn't even know about it. But now, on a daily basis, they hang on to every word that anyone says. Stories emerge all the time. So it's naive to think that they wouldn't pick this up, and then investors, that's how investors are. They spook easily. They spook easily. So it doesn't require great forecasting skills or to know that that will happen. It's just that I verbalize it, and it did happen, came to pass, because we're savvy to these things. They happen. So that's one. And two, I hear people say, why the company didn't appeal the ruling? Why did the EPA? Because it was the EPA that was sued, not the company. The company joined in. The EPA was the only one with the real standing in the matter. So Exxon couldn't appeal the ruling. It was the EPA that was sued. So they're saying, why did Exxon not appeal? Look, the government of Ghana appealed. The EPA had to appeal it. And so, they're in Exxon's pocket. So they appeal on behalf of Exxon. You can tell him the questions, you're giving him all the things, man, having a hard time reading the questions there. You could whisper it to him, or you could ask me yourself. Don't pass it to the poor gentleman there. Yeah, don't. Glenn give you all a couple this time. The papers, all right. Yes, so that was one, Marsha. And by the way, the Stafford News had an editorial a few weeks ago and said, let me see if I find this thing. Right? They were talking about the Marriott. And they quoted an analyst who said that this thing was about 15 times the price, or the P ratio was 15 times that, right? 15 times. Right. I had an editorial or a story. I quoted a Wall Street analyst who's savvy with Wall Street and say that the $65 million is bid was the upper limit that we will get, because it is a great bid and it was several times the earning ratio of it, etc. So we had that from the Stabrook. We could not get, and the government annulling the bid would have caused a lot of. I wanted to deal with this because I said last week we will I have it here. Government decision to discard Marriott bids raises questions. So Stabrook News. I don't think it's an editorial. It's not. The decision not to proceed with the bid process will raise questions as to the credibility of future invitations. Not proceeding with the bids could also have possible legal ramifications. The analyst said that the hotel's best year was 2022, during which it made just over $5 million in pre-tax profit, or $3.75 million in after-tax profit on sales of $24 million. The analyst said that this means that all bidders who offered $50 million and more have in effect agreed to pay 15 years of profit. So that was one. They said we really should have proceeded with a bid for $65 million. The Kaichor News, on the other hand, after saying Jagdeo owned this property for 10 years, Jagdeo owned the Marriott. We had secret investors in the Marriott. Jagdeo wanted to give his friends the Marriott. Then the Marriott is a very lucrative investment. Then we got two bids that we should give it to the low of the bid because it's Guyanese, $55 million, not $65 million. Give it to the Guyanese who bid $55 million. Then we annulled the bid because Jagdeo wanted to give it to his friends now for a lower price. This is all the narrative all week long. You see Glenn Lal with his madness doing like this on a TikTok all the time, crazy. And then what happened? We went back to the bidders and we said the reserve price is $85 million. So we're not going to sell this hotel less than $85 million. And now we have two bids for $86 million and one for $90 million. So if we had sold it at Glenn Lal's price, we would have gotten $25 million US dollars. In fact, $35 million US dollars less than what we could get now potentially. $35 million US dollars at the price he wanted us to sell it at for. And I'd like to have, as a result of this friendship with Jagdeo, the country is getting $35 million more. The man is not my friend. And nobody was my friend. They don't know how we built the Marriott. It's a warped mind of people like Glenn Lal, who were preying on innocent citizens. Now you see him walking as a precursor to a political party, and he has a bunch of crooks following him, some from abroad. I'll deal with them a little bit later, because all of them have their skeletons in their closet. He's picked up a motley bunch of has-beens, wannabes, all kind of people. Old AFC people, right? Criminals, and put together a little party. I saw the party structure recently. So we're going to deal with that later. But this guy has been on his mad trip all the time talking about the Marriott. And I said, we've proven people wrong at every stage. And so I'm pleased that we have proven them wrong again. And I wish that Starbuck News will call this analyst and say, you're talking nonsense. Because people hide behind these things. Remember, J.H.K. Lal was an analyst too. They hide, I'm not saying he said this, but they hide behind titles, analysts. As I explained there are various forms of valuation. You can look at the profit, but you can look at the value of the asset, etc. And clearly people see in Marriott a great value. And we are going to earn as a country tens of millions of dollars more than we spent on building it. And that money will come into the treasury to do other things for the people of this country. They should be happy with it. Yes. Since Marcel, you're talking, you imagine, right, imagine the which agreement, there was a prospectus that went to all the bidders. So prospectus has information, and the people felt who put in the bid that there was sufficient information to put in the bid. Now we have to analyze all of those bids and their various components, but the fact is that people are prepared to raise their bids from $65 million to $90 million, right? That's the fact. So there was a prospectus. So, okay. Yes.
This is a broad court action against the Guyanese Press Association with the intention of bringing some sort of transparency. That ended up being a very embarrassing situation for me, since, as I quote from Genereal, Chief Justice of the Senate described the matter wholly misconceived because of the fact that the Guyanese Press Association is solely the property of Nazim Rakbir, business name. Obviously, after what happened last Sunday's election, the Kaito News played a role in the attempts to deliberate and clear attempt to rig elections, and Guyanese Press Association by introducing Bollywood producers and producers in their studios who don't fit the criteria for members of the Press Association, voting members. How does the government see and treat an organization that has no transparency, no accountability under today, and expect to hold persons like the government accountable and transparent?
Well, every week I'm learning a bit more about this. And sometimes you should not take people at their face value. The ones who protest the most and make the most noise sometimes have the biggest cupboard of skeletons. And so for a very long time, I labored under the impression that this was a properly constituted body that had a legal standing either in corporate membership and be accountable to that membership. And then I discovered, because of what came out recently, that there is no corporate body or society called the Guyana Press Association. There is a business name called the Guyana Press Association, owned solely by Nazima Raghubir. So this body is, as far as I'm concerned, cannot be representative of anyone. Because if Nazima Raghubir owned this trade name, she could tomorrow walk away with this. Now, there has to be a number of questions raised. So do they get grants from abroad? So if they got grants from abroad, which I gather have come in the past, to whose account did it go? Because the account has to be in the name of the person or the trade name, and therefore it's a private account. Has tax returns been filed from this business name? Have the proceeds from membership fees and everything else, and the help from abroad, have these been made known to everyone? This is all in the private person's name. I find this very, very unusual. Right? I find this unusual. So it's I saw the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice might be right that your whole thing was misconceived, because it's something like paraphrasing. She said it's a private entity and Raghubir owns it. And this is her personal business, basically. Her personal business. So so this is something else. So you were trying, it is like Kwame McCoy having a business name called Pulauri Club, and that's his business name, and you're suing to be part of his Pulauri Club, and he owns the Pulauri Club. This is so that's what I found funny, that you were suing to be part of the Pulauri Club, because if the this is a business name. If it was a fully incorporated entity and stuff like that. So that's very, very unusual. And I wonder, when all of these statements are made on behalf of journalists here, whether the international bodies are aware of the state of affairs of this organization. And then on the election side itself, it's unbelievable what happened from what I read. You know, I would like maybe people to frame this Royal Johnson's letter Ruel Johnson, the GPA response to Neil Marks. I read it. This opened up my eyes about what's really happening. If any Guyanese has now read this letter, read it, and then you will understand the state of the rigging that took place there. Pure and simple. This would never be tolerated anywhere in the world. Just read Ruel Johnson. I can't say it better than he did. And it's something that is shameful. And you know, from people who shout the most, they shout the most and they lecture us the most about everything. We come to this with a clean conscience. We'll work with any democratic press body that represents the interests of all journalists, that protect the interests of journalists. We have no interest in eroding press freedom or disparaging journalists or harassing them. Absolutely none. Absolutely none. That's the government of Ghana position. But we can't turn a blind eye also to this sad, sad state of affairs from people who moralize every single day. They moralize about government. They have the most to say. I think they're busy trying to put scotch tape on, holding the avalanche of skeletons that will pop out of the cupboard soon, holding it together with flimsy scotch tape. But I don't think that would stop the tide from flowing out, because now more people are aware and they will keep questioning it. And for anybody who helped to undermine this, it's sad. It's sad. I don't know if Kaichor News did, as you said. I can't comment on that. But I can comment that I've learned a lot myself about this matter. But stay away from the Palauri Club. That's my advice to you. All right, we set a reserve price. We got bids above the reserve price. We have a duty now to assess both bids and then make a decision. So we're not saying, I don't know when they go in the details of the bid, what the evaluation team will find, but they have an obligation to assess the bid and then make a recommendation to the government. Thank you.